Hi everyone, and in this video I'm going to talk about the script which is called SOR polishing, and I'm going to give you a small announcement right now because Storp actually stopped supporting this script and transferring the functionality of the script into the BasicOverRig script. Right here I have opened both of these scripts in order to show you what buttons are going to be transferred and potentially how can you use it in the BasicOverRig script. Right now, let me show you the correspondence between the buttons in the original script and in the BasicOverRig script. The parent in button is going to be the across button, which is located over here. Bake aim is aim. Make sort is going to be over here, sort system or sort as. And then accordingly the reverse button is going to be transferred over here. Yeah, right here. This part of this tool is going to be over here. In this lesson I'm going to mainly use the functionality from the BasicOverRig script, but I'm going to show you what buttons would you use in the original script if, let's say, you have it, maybe you bought it some time ago, and stuff like that. Only for those people who previously purchased this tool, essentially, so they could understand what buttons I press, the reason why I press them, and so on and so forth. The reason why I actually stopped selling this and supporting this tool is because it is caused by the fact that it is bought by far fewer people than the BasicOverRig script, and at the same time the BasicOverRig script is actually a very powerful tool for working with animation, and I decided to just add this functionality for the sort and polishing to this BasicOverRig script because I think it makes sense in that regard. In order not to spread the functionality among different scripts, I think it makes sense. So, what is it for? What is this tool for? It is designed primarily, of course, for game animators, because usually game animators create animations with swords or some kind of weapons, actually, swords, sabers, spears, axes, and so on and so forth. In this type of animation, in this field of animation, usually there are a lot of problems that arise. And this script is designed to solve these problems. Right now I'm going to proceed to explain specific buttons. The first button I'd like to talk about is this one, sort system or sort as. Or in the old tool it's called make sort. It's over here. So what problem is it designed to solve? Let's see we have an animation. In this case it can be a sketch of your animation, like block out for your animation, or just completed animation. Maybe it's a mock-up animation, mock-up data animation. Maybe it's cleaned up or brought up to some acceptable condition. But what is the problem? You can see that there is a guy, he is pulling out his sword, he is twirling this sword or flourishing his sword, I don't know, just showing off. But I'd like to, let's say I want to clean up his trajectory in order to make the tip of the sword to move maybe in some kind of arcing motion. Maybe somewhere around here I look at this animation and you see there is a problem, of course. Maybe I want to clean up these parts of the animation when there are intersections and things like that. The main issue in this situation is that we have animation not only in the arm, the main motion from the wrist, but we also have some kind of animation in the sword itself, and it's actually a very drastic motion. And for simplicity's sake, let me show you the range of motion for the sword. I'm going to apply a knot to the wrist, cue the animation, and you see how the sword is animated. So it's a pure animation on the sword joint. You see it actually moves quite a lot. And why is it a problem? There is no convenient normal tool out of the box that allow you to edit this movement when both the wrist and the saber or sword is animated. I think the most intelligent users, maybe the most experienced users who have been using my BasicOverRig script, they can say that you maybe can apply a knot to your sword, then you can use the parent across function to parent the control to this knot, things like that. So for those who actually use my script, to control the rotation from the sword. And then saber itself, you can apply to the separate knot to aim, locators. And it would work, but the problem is that when we have the system and we begin to change the trajectories, maybe change the movement itself, we can see that the rotation happens through the center of the sword. So through the point of attachment of the saber to the hand, not through the wrist. The main problem is that when maybe you are straightening your arm, you are overextending it, your arm is over-straightened. So it kind of flips, bends in not really plausible manner. And if you do not use the stretch IK system, and I use it over here, maybe if you use just a simple IK system, your hand, your arm is gonna pop. So it's essentially a very difficult task. That's why I noticed that, maybe you probably noticed as well, that animators actually avoid attaching the guns to the arms directly, in order to avoid problems because of this arm popping. In most of the cases, animators in such cases they actually animate only the wrist, but they leave the rest of the arm kind of wooden or in very broken poses in order to compensate some irregularities and things like that. But this is caused by the fact that maybe they have some kind of similar tool similar to my aim system, but which works in a kind of questionable manner. But it at least allows them to control the weapon through the wrist. So what does my script do? It's dealing with this problem. Let me show you. At first I'm going to select the weapon control, so the sword control in this case. Then wrist control, with holding down shift button. Clicking the sword system. Two locators are going to appear. Essentially, it's the same system, very similar system to the aim tool. For example, I'm going to move the first locator over here. Maybe I want to trace the tip of the sword. Maybe I want to trail the trajectory of the sword's motion based around the tip of the sword. Then I'm going to press the right arrow key. It's a standard button, standard hotkey for Maya. This allows me to select the second locator. After that, I can move this locator somewhere around here. Usually it's based around the sword direction. After that, I either click on an empty space or press the deselect button. So I'm just deselecting the locators and thus applying the system. You see the animation now is recalculated in this new system. And it allows me to control the movement through the top locator, through the tip locator, I mean. But the most interesting part is that the rotation is actually baked not into the weapon control, but into the wrist control. Thus, the inner structure of the wrist remains the same, but we have an additional layer of control for the rotation channel. So essentially, it's an additional corrective layer with the help of the wrist. You see, we don't have any unnecessary motions in the arm, everything is fine. It's especially true when you want to extend maybe your sword, your weapon, yeah, something like this. Right here I can control the twist, essentially the twisting motion of the sword, if needed. And now I can do the following. I'm gonna create a motion trail. And then, just a regular work of the animator, you can tweak this motion trail, make it more aesthetically pleasing. So essentially you have a lot of control, and it's great. It's very cool. And everything is going to look fine. As a result, we achieved a necessary animation, but it was really quick. It was done really quickly. You see over here, I can tweak the motion trail because I can tell that the trajectory kind of broken. You see, it's very sharp. But the question is, you can actually fix it frame by frame. Yeah, why not? But when you have a lot of frames, it's not really optimal way of working, because it takes an enormous amount of time. Also, don't forget that we want to correct not only the trajectory, but some problems with intersections and things like that. So this trajectory requires actually a lot of work. How can we optimize our workflow in order to achieve faster results? If you don't have my tool, of course, you're gonna spend a lot more time. Still, even using my tool, it still requires some time. So the question is, how can we actually make it better? Let's take a look. There is a special tool. It is called ArcPolish. You can find it over here. You're gonna have this menu. This tool allows you to polish arcs, essentially, and mainly arcs. It's a new version of ArcPolish with new features. They were not present in the old version of this script. So this ArcPolish is older than the new one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the necessary time range where I want to polish the arc. Of course, you can select an entire animation actually, but yeah, let's maybe try working in parts. So I'm going to select this section of the arc. Then I have to set the number of knots, maybe 7 or maybe 8. Then I'm going to press the ArcPolish button. You can see that the tool, this tool calculates the motion of the object and creates a special curve based around this motion. And essentially it attaches the motion to this curve, kind of allows us to work with this curve additionally. Maybe if I open the graph editor, let me show you really quickly. And since when we were creating this curve, we used like 7 or 8 points, the curve itself is rather smooth, so it gives us a very smooth result. And in the graph editor we can see the movement along the curve. Some kind of graph, okay, and accordingly we can clean it up here. Maybe we can just delete unnecessary keys in order to, avoid some sharp steps or things like that, so some jaggy motion. We can smooth it out like this, and that's it. And then, as a result, the motion is going to be far smoother. And of course we can add some changes. Maybe we can move the trajectory like this. Very cool, I think. So it's a tremendous amount of work, and you remember what the trajectory was previously. Now it's all corrected in literally seconds. In fact, maybe literally like 15 seconds actually. Let me open up the tool again. There is one button, it's the object that the animation is based on for the tool. Then I can bake this animation, or I can bake it actually into the separate animation layer for convenience. Now I'm gonna highlight the structure of this curve, delete it. But that's not all. Let's fix this issue over here. The intersection, as you can see, is quite noticeable. Let's actually select the entire motion with this twirling sort. let's set it to every 4 frames, I guess. You can also set the show source tick box. It's going to create some kind of curve which represents the older version. So what it was previously. Wow, that's a lot actually. You see there is a new curve created. And you see that we can actually see the difference. You can delete it, it's not really needed. And now you can change the animation as you wish. Let's actually make it a bit more interesting. Let's delete the system. Let's again work in parts. Because in this version you can overlap several animations, several kind of parts of your animation. Let's do this one. I'm going to delete this curve because it's kind of the previous motion. Now let's find a place where we have the intersection. Yeah, I'm going to correct it over here. Yeah, that's it. And you can tell that we fixed the intersection, works quite nicely. We can also create several curves. So we kind of can layer one curve on top of another. And you see now we have 2 curves created. So we can select this control, we can change the trajectory. It allows us essentially to control the trajectory of different motions, maybe to make the flow into one another a bit better, a bit smoother, so to speak. I think it works best for the transitions between different arcing motions. Now you can tell that this curve works on top of the first curve, so I can tweak it over here. Well, in this case it's not really necessary, so I can delete it. Okay, nice. Alright, what's next? Well, we can actually finish this animation over here. I think the principle, the concept of working is quite clear. Let's do over here as well. Of course, it's not necessary to remove all the keys. It's up to your animation on how it looks. Let's bake it. Let's delete all these systems, all these supplementary nodes. Okay, nice. Now we can smooth it out. And the most important part, you can do it quite quickly. You see there is a jagging motion, kind of jumps from position to position. We can fix it over here. I'm gonna select I think this entire animation and then create a new curve. And that's it. Now we have this visualization and now we can fix the animation. Let's delete actually this part of the animation where it jumps from positions, where it changes positions and jumps from position to position. I think it's going to be like this and it's going to work fine. And of course the animation should finish smoothly, so there is supposed to be ease out, I think. So we can delete it over here. You can delete those keys as well to make it smoother. Yeah, nice, actually very nice. Yeah, I think we can delete over here as well. Yeah, you can see the result. We cleaned up the trajectory of this movement and got rid of unnecessary results. Also, we fixed the intersection as well, which is great. And since we did it through the tool, through this sort system, all these corrective were made based on this, based on the wrist rotations, and not affecting the entire arm. Then I'm going to select the entire system, I'm going to bake it down. You can use either the bake button or the button from the ArcPolish system. Those are actually the same. And after that you can just delete all the unnecessary stuff. It's not needed anymore. And now it is done. But also, of course, you remember that we can control the tip direction of the sword separately, and if needed, we can change the direction. I think in this case it looks fine, but maybe if you need to, you can absolutely do it. You see, I can control it like this, and again, it works relative to the wrist. Okay, what are other tricks that we can implement here? Let's select this range for this animation. You can control this animation actually through the Bezier curve. So you can see I've created a Bezier curve with the 12 points, and this mode gives you the direct control of your animation through the editing the Bezier curve. Maybe I can remove some points over here, it's possible. I can change the handles, so it's just a regular work with a Bezier curve, and it controls the animation, which is cool. This functionality was added on request from some animators who actually prefer working in this way. I can also easily use the regular Bezier curve tools in Maya, so maybe I can add some points in places where I need to. I think I can do it like this. Alright. Yeah, you can see I have added a new point, a new vertex to this curve. What's next? Here's where we have the trajectory control. I can control it with keys. Maybe at some point you need a sharp, maybe strike or sharp hit when the object hits something, when the sword hits something, sorry. And you want a more individual control of your keys. So it's not really convenient to work with keys in this manner. So what can you do? You can delete the key and then press the Ctrl-Z button. And now, right over here, you can control these keys individually, and you can change the curve for this specific part of your animation. So you can see it kind of hit something over here, stumbles a bit, or shook a bit, and gave you necessary result. So there is essentially a sense of impact or point of impact. Maybe you want to add some kind of acceleration along the curve in this part. And also, let me show you a different example of hitting something. First of all, remember, you can correct the trajectory relative to the certain point. Even in this kind of animation, where the character shifts the position for this knife of his, you can change the trajectory even for this animation. Again, we can apply the locators, we can move the locator to the tip of this weapon. Now we can create the curve and change the trajectory as needed. You can also control the rotation or the twist of the wrist. And notice, we are not disturbing the internal construction of the rig, of this movement, of this animation. It's very important not to essentially destroy your animation, but it gives you a sufficient level of additional control, which allows you to make necessary changes. It is especially true when you're working maybe with fingers, when you're animating something in the character's hands. We're just changing the trajectory and not affecting other parts of your animation, again, fingers and stuff like that. And another feature of this script, even in the cases when you have some kind of spear over here, and when you have an offset, you see, it is kind of offsetted from the arm. You see this weapon actually changes positions, changes angles. Even in this case, this tool will still work. Even in this case, the rotation is going to be calculated relative to the wrist. It's a very important point. Not relative to the weapon control, but to the wrist. Also, when you're applying the system, the new kind of additional control is created. It allows you to move the position of your weapon in the hand. So you can animate it in a specific manner, if needed, of course. Maybe at the moment of impact, you can have maybe an extra movement for your spear, in this case, some kind of additional motion. Yeah, maybe something like this. And one more important addition. You see the system that is created over here. So, I mean, all these locators that are created with this system, all these things, all these parts of the system can be reparented or connected to any part of your rig, maybe using the knots from the BasicOverRig script. That is why actually it's very convenient to have it in one script. So I can use the parent and side function and to parent this entire system into the shoulder locator, and now I can rotate the shoulder, and it's going to rotate the entire system without affecting the sword, I mean without destroying the animation itself. So essentially you're layering your controls, and you can change the poses if needed. There is a huge part of flexibility. And now the last part of this tool, last script for this tool, I guess, reverse. Make reverse. Or it's called reverse S in the BasicOverRig script. It's needed when you either need to hit something. Maybe you have an object and you have a weapon and you need to hit another weapon, another object with this weapon. Or maybe when you have a machine gun, rifle, and so on. Let me explain. Let's say we have this animation. You see the guy attacks, hits something, strikes, things like that. And maybe somewhere around here, I want the sword to be stuck inside this, maybe wood, inside this cylinder. And of course, I need to create an additional animation, to make something with a sword, to make it look exactly like it's stuck inside the cylinder, or maybe it cuts through the cylinder. How does it work? First, I'm going to select the weapon control. Then I'm going to select the objects which are located inside the weapon. So in this case, I mean essentially both arms, because it's a two-handed sword and it's swung with two hands. If maybe we had 3 arms, then we would have selected 3 arms. Alright, so I selected 1, 2, 3 objects or controls, doesn't matter. Then I'm going to press this reverse button. You will see that I'll have new objects created. The first one, it's the point which will be, essentially it's going to be a pivot point at the point of contact. So it's the point of contact of your weapon, point of impact of your weapon with the ground or other object or other enemy, doesn't matter. Then I'm pressing the right arrow button, or just selecting the next locator over here in the outliner. It's top vector, essentially. We can move it in opposite direction towards the wrist. And the last one is the side locator, which is essentially moved to the position of sword's edge direction. After that, you can press the deselect button, or just you can click in the empty space. Alright, now the system has been calculated. And now I can control this animation from this point. And it's based around translations, so translate channel. And also, additionally, you have this, you can move your wrists, your controls, and it is based around this pivot. And of course, you can use the twist controls as well. And those objects, I mean arms in this case that we were selecting previously, they are essentially attached to the movement of the weapon. So you can see that I can move the weapon, or I can move the arms, and those are interconnected. What does it give us? Of course, right now we have the same animation, so it works as previously. But now, maybe we can find the point of impact, maybe over here. And now we can go, we can use either the animation layer, we can correct the motion. So essentially we want to make it stuck in one place, just keep the position. And then maybe somewhere around here. Yeah, you see it kind of holds in place. And somewhere around here I'm gonna disable this animation layer, just set it to 0. Yeah, you see, really nice. And of course, at the beginning we also set the 0 key, because it's very convenient to work with animation layers. You essentially turn them on at certain points when needed, and turn them off when they're not needed anymore. Now we can edit the animation directly. We can maybe tweak the hand motion through the layer. So I'm going to create a new animation layer. Maybe when he hits something, I think he should offset the arms like this. Yeah, maybe like this. And then somewhere around here he pulls out the sword. Yeah, maybe I think over here. Okay, seems nice. Yeah, you see, nice, really cool. And while we are at it, animating, maybe somewhere on here I'm gonna rotate the sword as well. Yeah, maybe like this. Again, you can see that you have a lot of freedom in terms of just creative freedom, working with animation quite freely without thinking about some technical things like offsetting your controls, how one control gonna affect your entire animation, and things like that. And again, working with animation layers in that regard is really helpful. It's my favorite workflow as an animator myself. Yeah, I'm gonna make it so it bends like this because of impact. Let's say we bake these animations. We can also use these controls. We can parent them to specific parts. Maybe you can parent them to the cylinder, to control these locators through the motion of the cylinder. Let's apply a knot to the cylinder because it's a bit more non-destructive. Then I'm going to use the parent inside function to parent this object inside this cylinder's knot. Okay, nice. Now we can animate the cylinder itself, because of course it's going to shake a bit at the point of impact. And you can see you can see that we move the cylinder, and the entire animation moved as well, and it's a very flexible system. Very cool. And maybe it's gonna move like this as well. And so on and so forth. So maybe in this case the weapon is sticking into this cylinder. Again, it can be, it may stick into a floor, it may stick into a head, the enemy's head, when you're doing some sick combos or things like that. So you can do everything that your imagination allows. And another way to use this system is the following. For example, when you have some kind of shooting animation, when you're shooting a rifle or a machine gun, so something that essentially affects the shoulders. Not only that, but mainly shoulders. What's the point? How does it work? I'm going to select the weapon control, going to select the arm controls, then applying the reverse system. Now I have to place the first locator in the shoulder. So it's the point of impact between the weapon and the shoulder. Then I'm going to place the aim locator somewhere around here, along the barrel, and the side locator somewhere to the top. Now this entire system, hands and the gun itself, have been recalculated to this system. And now the control essentially comes from the shoulder. So it's based around the shoulder. And the weapon's aiming is also based around is controlled by the separate locator. And accordingly, after that, we can parent this locator to the separate control. Or maybe we can parent it to the clavicle. And now I assume when he's holding this rifle, there shouldn't be any offsets between the rifle position, so weapon's position, and the clavicle. In order to achieve this result, I'm going to select the necessary time range and then set the same value in this time range. And then I think I can do the same in the opposite direction. I think it should be somewhere up to this point where he still holds the position. And now our weapon is pushed against the shoulder, the clavicle, and it is far easier to control in this kind of complex animation, which is actually very cool. Maybe he shouldn't, it shouldn't spin like this, I assume, because in animation it will look kind of poppy. I think it should stay the same, the rotation should stay the same relative to the chest, I guess, so we can use the parent inside function. We can't parent it directly, because the spine is scaled slightly, so we can apply knot, a knot to the spine, to the chest control, and then parent it inside this knot. Alright. And I think, yeah, it shouldn't be offsetting relative to the spine as well. So I can select the necessary time range. Yeah, I think it should be up to this point somewhere. So before this moment it shifts, and then when he's aiming, there shouldn't be any offsets. Because he's aiming, he's holding his gun firmly. Yeah, I think it should work like this. Okay. I'm gonna place the same keys, the same values. And there it is. You can see that he is looking, aiming, and accordingly, if I want him to aim in a different direction, maybe along different axes even, I can control it as well. I can even make him aiming like directly along the y-axis without affecting the animation, the motion itself, so it still looks fine. It's very cool IK-based system. Because in the mock-up data he shoots kind of top to bottom, but I want him to look maybe forward, slightly forward. Of course, I can also correct the spine as well. It's a bit of a separate conversation at this point while working with the animation layer. I actually do have a separate course on my Gumroad on how to work with mockup data. It's a very complex course, how to clean up mockup data, clean up mockup animations and things like that. Let me actually raise his head slightly. All right. Yeah, I think something like this will work fine. And you can see that hands and everything else works fine. You can animate them separately, you can add some additional motions for the hands, but they're essentially attached to the rifle at this point, which is cool. And you can imagine without this attachment, without these systems, it would be really inconvenient when you want to change the maybe aiming direction, but you have to offset entire animation, offset arms, offset some additional controls other than the rifle itself. And I think at this point that's it. And also one small thing to add up. Let me bake this animation over here. I'm gonna delete, remove unnecessary locators, unnecessary stuff. Let me delete all of this. And you see, after working with all these nodes, with all these subsystems, there are some additional channels that appear, blend nodes, some constraints, things like that. You can see it, you can actually see it over here in the channel box. Unfortunately, it's just an unavoidable result of working with all these constraints for animation and things like that. That is just how Maya works, and yeah, that's how it is. In order to clean it up, you can select the controls that you've been working with, and then use the delete channel button, which is called DelCH button over here, and it's going to delete all these unnecessary channels. You can see it over here. Oh. So after baking, you can just select all the controls and delete unnecessary channels. Why can't I do it kind of automatically? Maybe when baking. You see, it's very rarely, but sometimes I actually find myself working with rigs, which are done maybe by some not very experienced riggers, which have some kind of functionality attached to these channels, to these very specific channels. It's not really convenient, it's not obvious why they actually do it in this way, but sometimes it happens, and that's why I do not automate this process. If you find yourself working with such types of rigs, then just do not use this function. Also, this function deletes one specific channel that appears on the models when you are importing them from the 3ds Max. I believe it's called max handle channel or something like this, so this button deletes it as well. It's actually a quite common thing when there are a lot of these max handle channels. I believe they actually appear on all the joints as well. Other than that, I think that's it. I hope you'll find this tool very useful. Again, it is added to the BasicOverRig script, which is all know is very useful script for animation. I believe I've covered all the functionality of this sort and polishing script. So see you soon. Goodbye.